it is okay to ask for help, right? We bring in that togetherness of the community and we ask for help. It's okay to admit to yourself, it's okay to admit to others that you need help understanding why you are the way you are, right? Why your kiddo is the way they are. And, it's okay to go out and seek a guide. Today's episode was originally slated to be a sensory processing episode, right? Which is our story, how we figured out what role sensory processing played in my kid's life and him growing up and how we learned a ton about ourselves in that process. But the reality is, as much as I know about that, I think we would be doing you a disservice if I handled that episode by myself. Dayna has written an entire book on the subject with a couple of occupational therapists from Inspired Treehouse. And, it's an amazing resource if you guys haven't had a chance to check it out, right? It's just sensoryprocessing101.com. You can grab yourself a book. It's super amazing. It's full color, all that good jazz. But she wrote the book, right? So I think I would be doing you guys a disservice by saying, hey, I'll just talk about that, right? I know a ton, but I think she's got a couple of things figured out that just don't come naturally to me. And, if I'm being honest, she was the one who brought sensory processing to the table, right? She's the one who was sort of like in the trenches figuring this out, right? And if you've listened to earlier episodes, we joke about how in those really hard times and those really tough times, I was researching turtle tanks and turtles and how to get the right filters and all these things. It was like a problem we had, but it wasn't the main problem that we had, so to speak. But I kind of was just like, I was handing over some of my power to her, and she had the early childhood education background. She had all the psychology stuff down. We're a mixed family, right? So I'm step parent to the two boys, and then we've got our daughter who is ours together. So I was just kind of like, oh well, I'm just kind of playing the step parent role. I didn't know exactly where to fit in. So that's exactly what it actually. I wasn't planning this segue of. But, it's worked out pretty well, right? Because this is a perfect segue into what I wanted to talk to you guys about. And that is, right, how do we as dads, right, at the time of this recording, 2023, right? So in the 2020s, how do we as dads, as fathers, how do we invest in figuring out what our role is in modern parenting, right? What the heck does that even mean, right? How do we get invested in figuring out their role for modern parenting? And I think this is what I mean by this. I think there's a couple of layers here that I want to talk about that I think are going to be super important. I'm not going to call them ground rules per se, but just ideas that have been coming to me that I've been jotting down over the last couple of days when it became apparent that I was going to be doing this episode. The main thing that was happening is she felt so alone in the parenting rat race, right? She thought her kid was broken and what are we going to do and how she failed him and that she was a failure. And that resonates really, really well with the women in our audience, right? They come in, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. You're right. This community is amazing. And it's really heartwarming to provide that sense of community and that sense of belonging, because I think that's critical for all humans. And the amazing part to me is that it's not just women who need that sense of belonging. Men need it too, right? But right now we're at an interesting time, right? There's a shift happening. There's a shift coming kind of down the pipeline here as we start to move away from sort of old way top-down systems to a more community-based, right? Which is almost like this is the original plan, right? Let's work together as a community to raise kids. And I think we're finally coming down to the head of old way doesn't work so well, right? Top-down does not help people feel seen, valued, or heard, right? And I want to put that message out to men, right? You are not alone. I know that I've had the opportunity, the pleasure to coach a couple of men one-on-one, right? Sometimes they're partners together, but I've had some sessions just with the men. And even a couple of years ago, I got the pleasure of knowing a gentleman really well over the course of a year as we did one-on-one coaching together. And I think it's just as important. I think it needs to be said, right? Like, guys, you are not alone, right? So I think the thing I want to really take shape here is the emphasis on doing things together. For our married folk, that means like including the kids in on conversations, including the kids in on decision making, including their wife in on how they're feeling, what they're going through, what they're thinking, right? How can we bring them into the conversation? For solo dads out there, right? And I know we're sort of addressing this like mano a mano, like dad to dad. But, for you moms listening, right, I think you can kind of make the parallel to yourselves here as well. So for solo parents or solo dads, what does that look like, right? How do you have a together relationship if it's just you and your kid, right? Maybe you have a sitter that helps you out. Maybe you have grandparents that help you out. How can we include them in the conversation? How can you talk to your coworkers about what's going on, right? Just start involving your network of people so that you don't feel so alone, right? Because chances are there are other people in your vicinity, right, in your pipeline that can help you, right, and help you feel not so alone, maybe give you some advice. Heck, you can come out and hang out in our world and get the support you need there too, right? The definition of community has just changed so rapidly in the last 20, 30 years, right? So there's definitely a place for you if you choose to seek it out, which is pretty amazing. So again, just the emphasis on together. I think it's super important for that feeling of connectedness, the feeling of support, and just dealing with some of the hard changes that, come with becoming a father. The second piece is, I think they're all equally important here, right? And this one goes hand in hand with the emphasis on being together. Now, this one I think is particularly hard for some people. There is an emphasis for men to feel like they need to have answers all the time, things getting figured out, right? We are a gender. Is it gender? Is that the right word? I was like species. No, that's not it. I was like genus. Nope. So, like as a gender, right? As like the sex of male, I think tied in with some of the like sociological like downloads we get, like what society tells us, right? We tend to be fixers, right? We're doers, we're action takers, we're fixers. And I think in the last, 50, 60 years of modern psychology, and probably bolstered by a lot of women's magazines, over the years, is like, not everyone needs you to fix everything all the time. Sometimes they just need you to listen. So let me put it this way. Women are not the only ones here who feel this way, right? Sometimes you just need someone to listen, right? Whether you're man, woman, and everything in between. So I think what I'm saying here is it is okay to ask for help, right? We bring in that togetherness of the community and we ask for help, right? It's okay to admit to yourself, right? It's okay to admit to others that you need help understanding, why you are the way you are, right? Why your kiddo is the way they are. And it's okay to go out and seek a guide, right? Maybe that's a counselor or a therapist. Maybe it's an online platform, an online coach, a transformational coach, whatever that is for you. Maybe you just need a friend to listen. Maybe you need a spouse or a partner to listen, right? But having that sense of togetherness, comboing it with the permission to ask for help, now we're starting to have a super powerful relationship, not only with ourselves, but our kids, and maybe our spouse or our partner as well. Okay, now those two premises are pretty strong. And I want to, I'm by no means making this like an all-inclusive list or an all-encompassing list, but these three really stand out for me. And the next one really comes down to the need to get everything right. That is something that happens a lot of the times. It is a result of how the brain works when you are growing up and, downloading the thinking of those around you. And the result is that when when you're young and you get things wrong, right? Or things are going wrong, maybe in your environment, maybe your parents are fighting or your friends got into a fight, you start to internalize that. And, you make it your compass, your North Star to, make things right? Because when things are out of place, you're like, oh, let me just fix that real quick. I can fix this. I'll do that. Right. Which again, like, you bring it up to the first one, like it's okay to get things wrong, right? It's okay to ask for help when we are in this together, right? We're going to figure it out together. Right. But we the way we currently have society set up, the way we currently talk to kids and help them, kind of like in the old way fashion, it doesn't allow for us to have that conversation, that honest conversation of, hey, you know what? I noticed that you were trying to fix the situation, but this isn't actually about you. This is about us, right? This has nothing to do with you. Like we don't have that conversation for the most part, right? I'm sure some parents are having that, or some caregivers are having that conversation. So when you have this permission to get it wrong, when you have the permission to feel your feelings, right? Some pretty amazing things happen, right? When you are permitted to feel your emotions and process them, right? Not just shove them down, not just say, well, this is how my parents did it, and this is how their granddad is, and you man up and you go for it and you lay down the law, right? But when something happens and it hurts, right, or it feels bad, really getting clear on what that means, right? How can we as a society get to a point where, men have access to models of thinking that help them regulate their emotions, right? How to get them access or give them permission, right, to see things differently when things aren't perfect in their world, right? How do we start changing that? Because I think if we can get in touch a little bit with some of the emotions that are going through your body, right, and through your mind while you are experiencing like the joys, the ups, the downs of parenthood, of fatherhood, right, some amazing things could happen. Because if we're having a relationship with the world at large where we are together and we're one, right, when we are asking for help when we need it, when we're feeling our feelings, right, we won't have that need, that aim for perfection all the time, right? And if we aren't aiming for perfection, right, if that isn't our goal, right, because that, to be honest, guys, it just doesn't exist, right? Shoot for like 70, maybe 80% of perfection max. And so if that doesn't exist, right, that means we're not downloading that baggage, right, onto our kids, that they have to get it perfect and they have to know all the answers and they have to do it alone, right? So if we didn't get into the game, right, to be perfect, right, if that's not possible, if it's not if it's not an actual outcome that can be achieved, right? I think it's time to start changing how we play the game. So I think that leads into my story. And I remember in the very early days, right, we were figuring out a lot of things, or what seemed like a lot. Now it's kind of like just the tip of the iceberg, about what made my kid tick, and eventually what made me tick. And the journey we've been on since then has just been like transformational, life-changing, to say the least. You know, we have the intro stories where we talk about how hard it was, growing up with my oldest. And I'm gonna retell just a little bit of it, but I don't want to, repeat too much information. But the idea here is that my kiddo, he was 7 or 8 at the time, right? He had always been a little different, growing up. I had the 2 boys for a couple of years there before my daughter came along. And I remember my now middle son, I think he was like 3 or 4, maybe 5 at the time. We really connected. He was like a big goofball, a lot of fun, just really liked to roughhouse. And he was super sincere and considerate, like a really super nice guy, right? He would just give you the shirt off his back if he could. And we connected a ton. And I remember it being really, really hard to connect with Eli. And it took a couple of years and, a lot of different things down the road. And we ended up taking him to a really awesome Nuka chiropractor, like out in like Rockford, right? We used to drive 2 hours to go see him. He was super cool. He was really gentle. I think he really understood kind of like how to approach, Eli at the time, because too much input would excite him. And he just had this very calm manner about him. And I remember we discovered that he would kind of do like the eye test, like where you take your finger and you move it left and right and up and down. And what he realized is that Eli's eyes weren't tracking, right? He would get to a certain point and it would stop. And then like he would like reconnect later. But there was a very large gap. And he did the adjustment, this very first appointment. And Nuka is like a very gentle approach, right? They just sort of, they only adjust like the upper cervical stuff, kind of like from your like nose down to your neck. Not a chiropractor, so don't quote me on that. But like, it's just the very high side. And it's a very gentle approach. Like it's all about sort of like the leverage of the hand. And if you don't know anything about it, it totally looks like they're not even like putting any pressure or applying anything, and I remember my skeptic wife was just like, did they do anything? I'm so confused. Why did we drive all this way? Why did we pay all this money? And like at the Christmas miracle part of it was at the end of it, he gave him the same, finger test, the up and down and the left and right finger. And he was able to track every single movement. And it was like, it was amazing. And I'm tempted to say that it was a Christmas miracle and it was like, Merry Christmas to all. But the reality was it was like Nightmare on Elm Street because, in this moment, we realized that he was never really truly looking at us when he was looking at us. He was looking to the side, he was looking above, he was looking down below, but he was looking anywhere but into our eyes or in our face. And what ensued after we, gave him sort of the boost or the charge to like fully have tracking of his eyes was that for the first time in a long time, forever maybe, he was able to truly look at our face and comprehend that maybe we were not so happy with him in these moments. And he was like, whoa, you're super mad at me. Or man, I've disappointed you. Or whatever he was reading in our face that he never really truly had a chance to. What I realized kind of simultaneously while this happening is that I wasn't connecting with him because we were never really truly like meeting eye to eye. We were never engaging. And at the time, I didn't know any better that didn't exist, right? I didn't know how to connect beyond sort of the like fun roughhousing dad, because it was working so well for Caden, right? And it's like, it's how I grew up, right? I played sports with my dad. We hung out, we had fun. But you know, with Eli, there was a whole new ball game that I hadn't figured out yet. Going into those next couple of years, right, where I don't know what the scientific proof is behind this. I haven't done research on it, but I swear to you, there is sort of like this hormonal change that happens between like 8 and 10, 8 and 11, something like that. It's kind of like before preteens, like preteens. I don't know what it is, but there are definitely some changes that happen. And, you know, as my kiddo started to experience those shifts in his body, he started to become a lot more destructive, a lot more aggressive, you know, and a lot more like inwardly hateful of who he was becoming. Now, I'm pretty sure that's what was going on in his mind. So let me paint the picture just a little bit, right? We were having multiple meltdowns a day, multiple physical aggressions during the day. They were lasting for multiple hours, right? So sometimes we would have like 5 or 6 2-hour meltdowns a day, right? Now, if you do the math on that, it's not pretty, right? So maybe don't do the math on that. And I remember blaming my kid for like my life falling apart, right? Like our marriage was crumbling. I was angry all the time, right? I wasn't paying any attention to my middle kid, right? I was doing everything I could to survive, right? We were in business. We were trying to make, you know, ends meet. We were trying to make money. We were trying to grow this program. And, you know, I was trying to protect my daughter, you know, and in some ways she was protecting me, right? Because I was able to like take the baby and then like get out of the house, or take the baby and go to a different part of the house, whatever it was miserable, right? And I was blaming him for all of that. Now, it seems pretty crazy to take an 8-year-old and then blame your entire life passing or failing on them, right? And I've learned that now, but in the moment, it is so hard to realize that you're giving all your power away to an 8-year-old whose only like mission is to try and figure out what in the hell is happening to them, right? They're like in a rage, they're throwing fits, you know, and when they're over and everything's calm, they have so much remorse and regret. And they're like, oh my God, I don't want to be this way, right? And I remember thinking one day, I'll tell a little bit of that story too. So after a couple of months of this, maybe a year, we started having such big fits that we were having to go to the hospital for help because we just didn't know how to help him. He was getting so aggressive or so violent that there was no way we could safely hold him, and we needed help. So we would take him to the hospital or get an ambulance, or, you know, whatever the case was, right? And then it would happen. So after we take him to the hospital, right, we have like we have some caseworkers who say, hey, we need to admit him into the hospital, which we said, I think in the last episode or maybe one before that. And we had so many incidences where it was like, oh my God, it's a $3,000 ride to the hospital. So I'm just going to take him myself, right? We're half a mile from the hospital. We can put him in the car. It'll be totally fine. So this one time we get him. He's in the parking lot of Starbucks. He's on the roof. He's like kicking at us. He's stomping on the roof. What's amazing is no one in the drive-thru calls the police. No one asks if she needs help. It's just my wife like crying on the curb. There is an 8-year-old or 9-year-old, whatever he was at the time, you know, stomping and kicking and screaming. No one offers to help, right? So again, like point one, we're in this together. If we have a community where we are asking for help, right, how can we make this happen? So Dayna calls me. I grab all the kids, I throw in our other car, we drive to the place, I kind of goad him to kick me, he kicks me, I grab him off the thing, I put him in the car, Dayna is like holding onto him in the back seat, and we drive to the hospital. You know, now In hindsight, this is a traumatic disaster that I've got all of my children and my wife, right, with a kid who's having an absolute meltdown, like an out-of-body experience, right? So it was totally worth the $3,000 ambulance ride to avoid that. I know now. So it just little tip in case that happens to you guys. Just money doesn't matter. Your kids' mental health far more important. So, but it led to this realization, right? So we've got my wife in the car, kids are with me, they're in the waiting room of the hospital. I go out to kind of guide the nurses to the situation, to the car. And they start taking charge. And originally, I think it was 2 guys came out, and then they call for backup, right? And eventually there were 6 grown men who very calmly communicated with each other and made sure that he was safe. And they got him out of the car onto like a gurney and like strapped him in so that they could get him in the hospital, so they could give him some medication to just calm his nervous system and just chill him out a little bit. And it was in that moment, right? I think it was like right around like the time of Avenger or something like that. Like there were these multiple epiphanies that I had. And it was one that I'm pretty sure my kid was turning into Hulk, right? It was no longer, 9-year-old or 10-year-old Eli in his body, right? He had left the building and it was total rage mode, total primitive systems came online, right? You could say hello to him and he would have scratched your eyes out, right? Because he saw you as a threat at that point. Now, knowing what I know now, doing the deep dive into all that work and truly understanding what was happening inside of his body, right? He was going into fight, flight, or freeze, right? And he was clawing his way out, right? Some kids will run, right? Some kids will shut down. Some kids will fawn, right? They'll just say, yeah, okay, whatever you want, right? But inside they're dying, right? They're burning themselves alive, but they're just, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, whatever you need, right? They're not advocating for themselves. So for him, it was that fight, right? So it was really, really similar to Hulk. Now, in the subsequent months, and years down the line, this is where my journey begins of becoming a new human, right? This is when I thought something has to change, right? And you can watch some of the past episodes and listen to Dayna and I talk about our marriage and what had to change. And, we've talked about what it meant to get divorced and we talked about how scary that would be and all the different avenues, right? And I think what I was trying to say in that moment was that like, I couldn't live like this anymore. Something had to change, right? And for me, it was rock bottom, right? I was super angry all the time. I was going into rage mode. I couldn't help. It's like I seemed to make things worse, right? There was a ton of negative self-talk surrounding almost every minute of every day, right? Nothing that anyone did was good enough. It's like a train wreck. It's a nightmare, right? Like, change the channel, man. I don't want to see this anymore. Sometimes it's awful to look back and say, whoa, that's where I was at. Wow. I hope I'm never there again. Right. And I think that's why I love what I do, right? Because I can maybe inspire some change, some growth, some personal freedom in some of the things that we teach, here at Calm the Chaos, right? And in our Calm the Chaos community and the coaching we get to do there. So it's something that really lights me up and makes me feel like I'm making a difference in this world. So in the subsequent months, I started to really do some deep work, like deep inner work around my anger and how could I let go? I remember I started having conversations with a therapist and she was helpful to an extent. It was a lot of like talking and there wasn't a lot of coaching and there wasn't a lot of questioning. It was just like allowing me to be and to think freely. And there was nothing attached to it. There was no judgment involved, which was a great step, right? And it's hard to have those tough conversations, and it's hard to have the freedom of speech when you're talking to your partner or to your friends, right? Because there is some ugly that comes out, right? There is some not Pinterest perfect, stuff. The transformation began there, right? I started feeling all the feelings. I started to understand what was making me tick and what was making me so mad. And one of the transformational things that came into my life was the thought that you're giving away your freedom, right? You are making a choice to hand over, what I call personal power, right? Your energy, your life force, whatever it is for you, you're handing that over to someone else and saying, you know what? It's on you, right? You do it, right? So whether that is your kid, right? It's up to your kid to make you happy, or it's up to your spouse to make you happy. And I think a lot of that is just autopilot stuff, right? It's just kind of like this blame and shame victim mentality society that we have, right? A lot of it comes down to the way that the news is delivered. And there's a whole thought process there behind why it is the way it is. But when I had that realization that I was handing over all of my power to my 2-year-old, to my 6-year-old, to my 8-year-old, right, to my wife, to, all the things, right? Finances, the economy, the jerk driving down the road, honking my horn, right? I was all those things. When I started to get clear that that was not the reality that I wanted to live, that I wanted to start transforming my world from the inside out, that was like my ticket to freedom, my ticket to happiness, my ticket to the world that I live in now. And the amazing part is I would never have been on this journey. I would never have the connected, spiritual life that I have. I feel so much more fulfilled and happy and joyous if I didn't have these really hard moments with my kid. And these lessons that came from those really hard moments have made me who I am today, right? So as hard as it was to go through all this, right, I have so much gratitude and so much love and heartfelt thanks to my children for teaching me these things, right? Bringing me their wisdom, right? And helping me kind of come online, so to speak, so that I can feel my feelings and I can get in touch with my heart and who I am and what I want, as a person, as a dad, as a human being. Right? And it's just been truly transformational for me learning from them. I think my challenge for you guys as dads is to think about life a little bit differently. Think about, how you were raised. Think about what lessons you learned from your grandfather, your granddad, right? Think about what lessons you learned from your dad. What did you kind of download when you were little? How do you talk to your mom? How do you talk to the mailman? How do you, be the man of the house? What does that look like for you, right? That's how the brain works. We download all this information like a giant sponge, right? Before we were even really online. And those subconscious patterns that you learn as a child start to play out in your life as an adult, right? 95% of your day is autopilot. Your subconscious is doing the work for you. It's a brilliant system. I can't imagine having to consciously think about everything I'm doing all the time, breathing, looking, glancing, moving my muscles. It would be right? My whole brain would be on fire all the time. The amazing part is we have this subconscious system that does it all for us. But the downside is that a lot of that subconscious programming happened before you had the cognitive ability to make those choices, thoughts, and decisions yourself. So you're kind of fighting an uphill battle unless you had a really super amazing role model who was emulating, right, how to connect with yourself, how to connect with others, how to understand the people around you, how to have empathy and compassion, right, how to empower those around you so that not only you can succeed, but they can succeed all at the same time. And, when we can have that collaboration, right, then together we can move forward, right? So if you had that, right, and I was pretty darn close to that growing up, which is amazing, and I still had these massive leaps to go, like bounds to go before, I sort of made these leaps of, hey, how can I understand my kids? How can I accept them for who they are? Not how can I get mad at them for who they're not, right? And help change them into who they're not. So my challenge for you today is, what would it look like if you were to change the way you think about yourself, your kids, your relationships? What would it look like if you were to forgive yourself for not having all the answers, right? For not reaching out to your friends, your family, your spouse when you need them most, right? What would it look like if you forgave yourself for that? What would it look like if you were able to forgive yourself, right? And let go of the past? And I think the most important part is, what would it look like if you started asking for help? Right? I don't know how to handle my kids' behavior. I need help. I don't know what to do in these situations. I need help. Right? And I think finally is what would it look like if you started to work together as a family team? If you started to open up who you were, started to open up and communicate with yourself, with your spouse, with your kids, right? With your extended family, the community at large, and say, hey guys, this is hard. Parenting is hard, right? My kid isn't easy. I need help, right? And saying, can you help me? And that's the important part, because I know so many humans, when you ask for help, they immediately, right? Because it's so easy to help others, right? Because in a way it helps you, right? It makes you feel good about yourself that you're able to help, right? So when you give others the opportunity to help you, right, you get to fill their lives with joy. Your life gets to become a little easier. And just, there's a lot of harmony that you invite into your world when you start opening yourself up to the idea that you can't do everything yourself. You're not alone in this journey. There are others who've come before you. There are others willing to learn with you. There are others willing to carry the load a little bit while you're walking, this journey. And to me, that is the essence of humanity. That is the amazing, saving grace of the human race, right? Is that at the end of the day, we are a connected, human experience. And when you ask for the help, and when you say, hey, we're experiencing this together, is there any way we can build a team and build a foundation? There are some amazing things that happen. So I think that's what I have to say for today. Thanks for listening. I don't know what the best way to get in touch, but email help@calmthechaosframework.com. Let me know your parenting story. Just it's hey, dad episode, or whatever. Hey, this is for Jason. This is for Lemon Pickle. Whatever floats your boat there. Let me know. Does this resonate with you? Does this help? I'd love to connect with you guys and just help you on your dad journey, help you on your father journey. I think that's what I have for today. You guys are simply amazing. Thank you for listening, and go forth and conquer your day.